What's going on, guys? It's Frito here for your Overwatch. In today's video, we're going to take a look at the most viral Overwatch news stories this past week, which I admit our standard for viral Overwatch story might be lower than it used to be, seeing as we're struggling to get more Twitch viewership than Stumble Guys, the scuffed version of Fall Guys. You know, Stumble Guys, the industry nickname for Blizzard Entertainment. It's not all that bad. We'll get into some surprising positive news about Overwatch later in the video, but next up, the Royal Knight Mercy skin is on sale now till August 19th. You can cash in 200 Overwatch League tokens in order to unlock it. The reviews of this skin have been really positive so far. Granted, the Overwatch League just finished its midsummer tournament, and it won't go on again for a while. You can spectate the league to earn OWL tokens starting again on August 11th, so there's quite a lot of games to earn a bit more tokens if you're close. Mercy's been a bit contentious in the news recently because of the changes to Guardian Angel. Remember, we just experienced the beta version of that movement overhaul, and I suspect what their goal is to make Guardian Angel and the super jump, or whatever version of it exists in Overwatch 2, have a higher skill ceiling than it had in the previous iteration. The Overwatch League's mid-season tournament just wrapped up, and the Gladiators won again. That makes them back-to-back champions in Overwatch 2 so far. That's impressive. The reason I think they're winning so well is that they have sort of the right roster for the metagame of Overwatch 2 in general. A flexible tank, some high peak output DPS players, as well as some of the best-in-class mechanics from their support backline. They clearly put the work in to have strategical depth. They play a lot of comps well, and whenever the matches get into skill matchups, they seem to just win their ones, so to speak. It wasn't without its drama, though. In order to make these international competitions possible in the era of the Cerveza, they fly the NA teams out to Hawaii to play on 100 ping up against the Eastern teams, who are also on 100 ping. I think we're finally seeing the ramifications of the budget cuts they must have put through to the league, knowing, of course, that they were losing sponsorships due to all the Blizzard drama, as well as they're putting on an esport for a game no one else can play. Players and even commentators for the league were memeing about how claustrophobic the conditions were. Zoe here said, "At this point, I am convinced someone was actively trying to put together a 2008 LAN throwback setup. If I can either throw hands or play footsie with my opponent, I'm too close." Masa says, "OWL Grand Finals 2022 with the new thrill of more in-person tournament." This is a classic old school meme, old esports LANs back in the day, which were literally held together with duct tape, as we can see where this guy has to play from the ceiling. Linkser says you can interlock toes with your opponents. Go for it. Okay, so this is a rather dim look at how the league has fallen, or what it's resorted to in this interim period before we're actually in the full swing of the next game. It did, however, produce some quality memes. Players were so close that you could hear the enemy's comms and talk trash to your opponent right next to them. And hey, maybe that's the reason why Gladiators won. Their trash talk game looks seriously aggressive. I think this meme is quality, but I'd like to edit it a bit. It says Overwatch ranked in a nutshell, with players giving middle fingers to the opposition. In my experience in ranked, the players should be giving middle fingers to each other on the same team. Then it would be perfect. But wait, here's some surprising news. The NPD, which tracks video game sales, charts Overwatch at rank number 5 for June sales, thanks to the release of the Overwatch 2 beta. Now, look at how this stacks up. Obviously, Elden Ring was at number 1 and number 1 the previous month, but Overwatch was way down at number 57 in the previous month, then shoots up to 5. While some of the metrics we can look at for the game's health barely trigger a pulse, this is something I haven't seen anybody talk about. What this tells me is that there is an undercurrent of interest to see what Overwatch is going to do next. But as we might expect, it's not going to look good until the actual release of the game. And is that coming anytime soon? Well, Blizzard released a blog post at the end of the beta as the Queen decrees Overwatch 2 beta comes to an end, telling us what to expect next, and it doesn't seem to be another beta. They say over the next few weeks, the team will share more information about the data they've been collecting. We have new features and content that we look forward to sharing with you as well over the next couple of months. We're one step closer to launch now, and we can't wait to share more with you soon. also saying that with the beta coming to an end, one step closer to the beginning, October 4th. So it kind of seems like we'll just get information between then and now. They say here they're going to work on additional balance to the game that they've been developing based on the data that they've been collecting from us playing it, as well as work on an unannounced Fox-related hero that will be joining the support roster. This was kind of cute. When the beta went down, Blizzard left a code for us to decipher right at the end. It was in the chat log. Here, Flats puts it in a base 64 decoder, and it says, "What does the fox say?" You guys remember that viral video? If you don't, you're probably not old enough. It's nice Blizzard being quirky and teasy and a bit dorky yet again. Did we forget they used to do stuff like this all the time? I'd love for them to get back into it. Next up in the news, they finally made a Reinhardt statue. For a cool $1,000, you can have your very own Reinhardt hammer down statue. Oh, I'm sorry, $1,100. This thing is a 25-inch premium statue and weighs 22 pounds. Remember, these are hand-painted as well, but still. And honestly, if you look at the quality of his face, oh my God, it's got me feeling some kind of way. I might be inclined to buy this one if it was in the charging animation. Blizzard should have known. It's not about using your ultimate in an intelligent way. It's about pinning and charging in non-stop. So sorry, Blizzard, my $1,000 is going to be spent elsewhere. $1,100 is pricey in this economy. It's almost as much as a tank of gas. The next few sections are going to be discussions about Overwatch, the conversation about where they should go with the game, the state of the game, Overwatch 1 versus 2, things like that. The first one is a tweet by Stylosa that got 7,000 likes, quite a few, saying that he hopes there will be an unranked game mode in Overwatch 2. What the unrated version of the game is the competitive rule set with similar MMR matchmaking with a bit looser restrictions, such as quick play normally is anyway, but you play both sides and can drop in and out freely just like it's a quick play match. My only concern with this is you never really want to fracture a player base when it comes to queue times. So the only way I can see this being a good idea is if they don't have quick play, which is the just play one side, not a competitive mode whatsoever. Maybe that would be a easier thing to ease into the community once we have the PvE missions or other things to do, because this is actually a lot more controversial than it might seem at the surface, because I think a lot of players might appreciate the short game times of like a 8 to 10 minute game of Overwatch, whereas if you guarantee you're going to play both sides, you might not be able to finish them if that's the only amount of time you want. Like if they start going to 20 minutes, well, is that too long of a play session? For competitive players, of course not. We're used to it. Let's talk Overwatch 1 now. Boger says Overwatch is in an unplayable state and the only people playing it are addicts. This Reddit post echoes feelings that I've had about the game as well. Whenever I try to go from Overwatch 2 back to 1, it just is amazing. The amount of ability spam, shields, CC abilities. The poster goes on to talk about toxicity, the apathy of ranked and cheaters. I know that's something that everyone's really nervous about with a free-to-play game, but it's like cheaters are already in Overwatch 1. Like, they're going to have to deal with cheaters and the cheating problem in some way. Remember, authentication for your accounts in order to play is pretty important. We'll see if they're able to crack down on cheaters better in Overwatch 2. They did for quite a long time in Overwatch 1. Let's give them credit. Like, there was years where it's like there was no cheaters, and Overwatch was the biggest game in the world for a while. While I don't think the sequel fixes all of these problems, at least not by itself, we'll need like a ranked 2.0. To get a better idea of what you guys thought about this, I put out a poll asking if after playing the Overwatch 2 beta, keeping in mind consoles finally got to play as well, Overwatch 1 6v6 feels, and I voted myself, horrible. And then about a quarter either think 6v6 is better and another quarter think they're about equal. So I think it can't be a bad thing if they're at least as good. But over half of the 27,000 votes said that 6v6 is horrible compared to the freedom of movement and agency and the player experience and just everything about the gameplay in 6v6 I like better. Let's take a look at a few of the top comments here. The sheer volume of stuns, the power creep or ability overlap of things like Orisa Sigma. I do hear this argument, and it's one that I think Nateson tries to force onto me every time we talk about this, that nobody complained about some tank synergies like Reinhardt and Zarya or Winston and Diva. It's only when those synergies began to become overwhelming, but I just think the history of 6v6, whether it was role queue or open queue, always devolved into degenerate strategies, whereas I think one tank is incredibly balanceable from the team, and we've seen so far with the 2 Overwatch League tournaments we've had so far that it looks good to me. It's very tough to break and gives you a lot of opportunity to express your own skill and your team strategy. Here's a cool post that says, even though CG Rogan doesn't like 5v5 better, they enjoy the other upgrades like the lack of CC, the ping system, role passives. So overall, maybe aside from that specific change, Overwatch 2 is in the better direction. I think as well, when you get all the reworks and the upgrades to the heroes, it's gonna be tough to be like, man, this isn't an upgrade. We're not having a Warcraft 3 Reforged situation where the update feels worse than the original game. I don't think it's close to anything like that. Neil here talks about the growing pains of learning how to play the maps that you're so used to from 6v6, especially for dedicated long-time players. I can see this for sure. If you kind of got in that security blanket of the poke at the choke meta and you don't really do much until you ult, and then all of a sudden you have to worry about positioning every second of the fight in Overwatch 2, because there's so many different layers to how a fight develops, from the start of the poke phase to when it gets traded out. When is it good to go aggressive? How do you avoid death? It's way more complicated, despite it seeming more strategical by some people's argument with Overwatch 1. What people mean when they say that is that the team comps were a higher percentage of the gameplay in Overwatch 1, where one comp could just exist and destroy another comp without much user gameplay, which I don't think is very good. To that exact point, a coach named Avian wrote this big forum post that actually one of the community managers responded to, talking about essentially, if you don't understand the strategy of Overwatch 2, you probably just don't understand Overwatch 2 very well. Giving a example that I love to see, and is the type of thing I bring up in my content all the time, saying that like a lot of low ranked players who claim that they understand the game play it in a way that reveals they don't really understand the strategy of the game. So an example here, I watched a plat player recently who picked Sigma and decided to go straight to the objective and basically squared off against the Reinhardt instead of playing positioning that makes sense for Sig, that actually plays to the character strengths, which would be like nuking squishies and avoiding brawly type characters. The strangest part is that it actually worked for them because the person who picked Rein didn't realize that they could just walk at the Sig and start to batter him. So this is so indicative and well written about plat level play and below in Overwatch 1. Whereas now in Overwatch 2, well, everyone has agency, but a lot of players are like, well, I wasn't asking for agency, so now I have to actually like interact and go do things. So where's that comfy strategical security blanket to wrap myself in and allows me to avoid the ability and combat interactions of the game? Well, that just doesn't exist. They designed the game to do the opposite. So that makes it feel more tactical rather than strategic. These are terms that often get misunderstood. Tactics are not the same thing as synergy, although they're related. Strategy describes the macro plan of action, whereas tactics describe the moment-to-moment choices made to achieve a strategic end. Tactic is what you do in the moment, whereas the strategy is like our comp likes to poke or our comp needs to get in close. Andy agrees it's fair to say that 5v5 is more tactical with the ability to individually carry, but at the end, the team with the better overall strategy will win when tactical excellence is relatively even. This is a really good point. So when both teams are tactically executing similar levels of play, especially when the matchmaking is fairly even and your skill on the landing abilities and hitting headshots front is rather the same, then the better strategy overall, the bigger plans, will win out. I agree with both of them on this, but I would also add that Overwatch 1 had situations where the strategy is all that mattered, and none of the enemy individual players' tactics could outweigh their comp being worse. It's like if you had a better comp, you could kind of just exist in the better comp and easily win. Now that's not the case. And maybe strategy and tactics are on a closer to even footing as opposed to the build being more important like it felt oftentimes in Overwatch 1. I imagine that there's probably a lot of players that maybe don't play a lot of Overwatch or a lot of ranked and are in some of those middle tiers, maybe even like as high as Diamond, that might drop a rank or 2 or 3 in Overwatch 2 because it's so much more of an active game. And there's certain skill sets just like let's say you know how to regroup really well and pick the right comp. That doesn't carry as much of your performance as it did in Overwatch 1. No doubt about it. Now, I think it's fair to say that 5v5 had a much worse reception nearer the start of the announcement and the first beta, but over time, I think it's culminated that more and more people, especially based on the poll that I took, seem to be on board that it is an upgrade overall for the game, even if you might personally find some annoyances with it. Crimzo says here that 5v5 is way better than 6v6. People were initially worried about the swap, but I feel that after months of scrims and 2 betas, it's a no-brainer that 5v5 was the right approach. At the moment, I'm a little bit worried about support queue times, but other than that, I think the game is massively improved, and I can't wait until October 4th. Our last interesting Reddit post here puts out characters that probably should get a rework in their opinion. Mei, Symmetra, Torbjorn, Roadhog, and Mercy. Ooh, I don't know if I agree with this, actually. And I'll leave it here. Maybe you can leave your comments below. Who do you think deserves to get reworked? This is something we could maybe talk about in between now and the release of Overwatch 2. They've said the things that they have planned, but maybe there's more things that they haven't mentioned yet that they were looking towards and will be working on in the next few months come the release of the game, finally October 4th. Guys, that's everything for today's news wrap-up video. If you did enjoy it, please be sure to leave it a like. It really does help us out, lets us know that you're enjoying the content. And if you haven't already, click subscribe and be sure to click the bell icon to actually get notified when our videos come out. Get notified directly to your cell phone. That's been it for me. I've been Frito for your Overwatch. I'll see you guys next time.